Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description.
Hello everybody, the Mazda RX-8. If ever there were a car that divided opinion between non-owners and owners more sharply than this, I've yet to meet it. There's plenty of cars out there where you've got people that say, yeah, cool, interesting, I get it, but it's not for me. Maseratis, Ferraris, 911s, BMW M3s, Audi RS4s. There'll always be people that look at cars like those and say, yes, sure, I totally get it, and maybe if I were a different person or in a different circumstance, that'd be the car for me. When it comes to the RX-8 though, oh boy, are things different, because you ask just about anybody and they'll tell you in no uncertain terms, here you have a car that will disappoint you and then it'll break you. You point out that you've been going through the classifieds and you've seen a Mazda RX-8 advertised for what seems like a bargain price for a car so well regarded, and you'll quickly be reminded, here you have something that drinks like an 8-cylinder, goes like a 2-cylinder, has the maintenance costs of a Ferrari and the badge appeal of a Mazda. It's a car with silly doors and an even sillier engine that no matter how well you care for it, how fastidious you are in your maintenance, will at some point break your heart. This is the car that looks at you from the classifieds with suspiciously low prices, sitting there like an automotive siren, a four-wheeled temptress, and you say, haha, no, I'll not be fooled, I know why those prices are so low. It is in fact so bad that I once read a buyer's guide for the RX-8, and the expert opinion was, if you really, really want one, buy a broken one, because then at least you'll be pretty far away from having to get the thing rebuilt again. So it'd have to be something really pretty special to convince people to buy it, wouldn't it? Well, it just so happens that I think it might be. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you why. Admit, I do feel a bit sorry for the RX-8 because it clearly comes from a company that is truly passionate about what it does. A company that is filled with real drivers, engineers that love the product they create, and people that are happy to do things a little bit differently because they truly believe that is the best way. However, when it comes to the RX-8, Mazda's dedication to the cause, I think, was both their genius and also their undoing. I'm sure by this point in time you've heard of at least the RX-7, the mighty Wankel-engined Rotary that came from the 1970s and stuck around until the early 2000s. It was a different take on the sports car, and I think a very interesting one. Now, the angry Dorito that is the Mazda Rotary engine has and will always be a fairly flawed thing. It has myriad issues, including a lack of torque. So, to compensate, along the way the car gained first a single and then later a pair of turbos, making it not just quick, but also tunable. However, another issue the Rotary always had to contend with, as did everything else, was emissions. And so, for this, the RX-8, introduced in 2003, they took a different approach. Here, the turbos were ditched, leaving the engine solo to rev all the way to 9,000 RPM. They also revised the way it was laid out. So, whereas before the exhaust ports were on the edge of each rotor, now they were on the side of the engine. This, I am told, is partly one of the reasons the thing suffered a little bit. though I'm no expert or engineer, so internet people, please help me out. Is that true or just hearsay? Though its predecessor was available as a 2+2, the RX-8 took a slightly different approach, with you being able to call this almost a proper 4-seater. You can, if need be, get 4 adults in here, and ingress and egress is aided by the extra door you get on the back. Well, half a door. This has the suicide configuration, which is actually quite clever if you've got space to get into it, but if you're in a car park, simply a pain in the backside. Depending on where in the world you were, the cars were then offered with a number of different trims and 2 different configurations for the engine. A 4-port version making 192 horsepower and a 6-port version making 231 horsepower, neither of which being particularly overburdened with torque. In 2008, for the 2009 model year, the car was then facelifted and turned into the 2nd generation. And this is where things get a little bit complicated, because elsewhere in the world, this 2nd generation was then available in a number of different trims. But here in the UK, we got only the top-of-the-line R3, which features exclusively the now 232 horsepower engine, up by 1, with a whole 159 pounds-feet of torque, that's 216 newton meters. Those figures delivered, by the way, at 8,500 and 5,500 RPM respectively. Also of note for this 2nd generation car, Mazda said they improved the oiling system of the engine, made some changes to it, making it even more reliable than ever before. Now, if you read the brief, you'd be absolutely convinced that this, at last, was a rotary engine which would last. And in fact, so confident were Mazda in the RX-8 iteration of the Rotary, they even gave it a whole new name: Renesis. Very biblical. Some of the improvements made for the 2nd generation car also include a new starter motor. Getting these things going was always an issue, not helped by the fact that, due to the design of it, you're not really meant to start these, move them a short distance, and then stop them. You run the risk of flooding the engine. It's such a risk that there is in fact a de-flooding procedure built into the thing. And I know plenty of people that did buy early RX-8s, only to find themselves stranded because their car wouldn't start on account of it being hot. Their dealer then telling them, go find a pub, have a pint, and wait it off. Along with all of the other upgrades of the 2nd generation car, the R3 also brought with it a nice body kit, making the already better looking car even leaner and meaner, with a nice splitter at the front, some side sills, a slightly different treatment for the back, and in here, some Recaro seats. You've also got a standard fit Bose stereo, a foam-filled crossmember, and Bilstein dampers. The R3 also gets these beautiful 19-inch forged alloy wheels. Though apparently these cars were available with an automatic, I don't think I've actually ever seen one in the UK. And to be quite honest, this is a rare example of a car where I'm going to say simply, do not buy an automatic. There are cars out there where I know the purist would say, get the manual, but the pragmatist in me would say, if for whatever reason you can't have a manual, sure, get the auto. No, don't. Just don't do it. First off, all of the power in an RX-8 is buried right at the top of the rev range. The automatic gearbox can't get there, and that is why in an auto car they quote slightly lower power figures. This is a car that thrives on the interaction between man, engine, gearbox and road. You need to be fully in tune with all of them if you want to get the best from the car. And if you have the automatic, you're just not getting that. Simple as. You are not getting the RX-8 experience. And I will readily admit that on paper, the RX-8 is a car that is a total and complete disaster. You see, one of the benefits of that rotary engine is that it's nice and light and compact, so you'd expect this to be a fairly nice and light car. It's based on the same chassis as the 3rd generation MX-5, the NC. So up the front, you've got a double wishbone suspension, out the back, a multi-link setup. It's of course a little bit longer, and it's actually packaged quite nicely. Not only do you have a bit more space in here than you might think, and certainly more than say a 911, you've also got a good sized boot too. And the engine being nice and far back in the bay also gives you that pleasing 50-50 weight distribution. But there's a lot of weight distributed across those two axles. Take a quick guess. See, I would have thought a car like this would weigh in at something like 1,250 kilos, give or take. That's the same as a Honda S2000. You'd figure that maybe it being a slightly earlier car, it would be perhaps similar, maybe lighter than the Toyota GT86 and Subaru BRZ. No. It's a bit of a heifer, this thing. It clocks in at just shy of 1,400 kilos. Yeah, I couldn't believe it myself, and that's for a few reasons. First off, it's not exactly a car overburdened with technology and luxury. Secondly, it feels kind of light and flimsy. The door feels very light, nothing in here feels particularly solid. And finally, when you do get out and drive it, it does drive like a car that weighs a couple hundred kilos less than it does. And this isn't the first time that I've driven an RX-8, but it's the first time I've been able to experience one across a period of time. I've had it now on the driveway for a couple of weeks, and though I haven't had the chance to use it quite as much as I would have liked to, I have now put a couple of tanks of fuel through it, and that means I've gotten to know this car fairly well. And I want to say a big shout out to my friends Damani and Ant for lending it to me, and also to Ben the Sparkle, that's what I'm calling him now, from Mile by Mile Valeting. He has given this car his square one treatment, gone over it with a fine-toothed comb, and it is looking absolutely magnificent. This R3 variant is particularly rare. Finding this car with just over 32,000 miles on the clock took Damani 9 months. And I would say it was time well spent, because this is an absolute delight. But of course, you cannot say the same of all RX-8s. And so, if by the end of this you are convinced to head towards the classifieds in search of your perfect bit of spicy spirograph goodness, then make sure to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases giving you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including mileage discrepancies, previous accident damage, involvement in fire, theft, and things like outstanding finance. It takes just 60 seconds and requires only a registration number or a VIN. For 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JayEmm. And why is it then that you would go and buy yourself an RX-8? After all, it doesn't have that much power, it doesn't have that much torque, it isn't particularly light, and it's not likely to set a lap record anytime soon. And we also know that although it may be day-to-day reliable, at some point in time the engine is likely to want surgery, especially with these now being all fairly old cars. So finding one like this, which has been cared for from new, is pretty rare. The prices of them in the classifieds are tempting, and you've been looking at them for ages thinking, yeah, I know why. You won't fool me, I'm not getting an RX-8. But hear me out. You should. It's really very easy as a car person to start boiling something down to numbers. You do that and the RX-8 just doesn't work. But you bring it here into the real world and all of a sudden you forget about all of that. And you realize that what Mazda have created here has to be one of the best driving experiences, full stop. And I don't mean for the money, I just mean this is an absolutely blinding car. It was about a week before I actually took this car out on the road. I went to go and get pizza, and I decided to go and get pizza from somewhere about 20 minutes from the house. by the time I'd arrived, I was in love, to the point that, I know Ant and Damani are looking to sell this car, I'm thinking of buying it. Where do we even begin? Well, let's start with that engine, shall we? It might be controversial, and sure, it may be lacking on torque, but get it spinning, which it'll do very, very happily, and you can revel in its smoothness, its beautiful power delivery. There is no VTEC-like step in it. Instead, it just gets a little bit more serious as it gets towards the top end of the rev range. From about 6 to 9, it pulls with authority. That little beep telling me I've hit 8,500 RPM. The gearbox then, well, it's utterly sensational, matched only perhaps by that in the S2000. And that's maybe no surprise because they are in fact the same gearbox. Not identical, mind, and this isn't even the same as in the Series 1 cars. They revised both the gear ratios themselves and also the final drive. I think they made the latter a little bit shorter, the former a little bit longer. But I have to say, it's actually the steering and the chassis which are the star of the show. Sure, it's not the lightest thing out there, and at lower speeds that Bilstein suspension, it's a little bit overly firm. But get some pace behind it, get it working, and this thing is amazing. The turning is so wonderfully crisp, the steering beautifully judged. There is a near Lotus-like quality to the way this car goes down a road, and that is the highest of praise when it comes to a chassis. Some slightly higher quality suspension on here, and what you would have, I think, is one of the finest ways to get from A to B with a big smile on your face. Sure, a diesel hatchback will leave you for dead, but this is just fun. I've also had the pleasure of passengering in one of these with Damani at the wheel. Now, he is a former racing driver, and I can tell you that when in the hands of someone properly skilled, unlike myself, that limited slip differential at the rear and beautiful chassis balance means the car is wonderfully playful. Visibility out is also fantastic. That bonnet, a wonderful shape with a big triangle on the front. In fact, you'll find many of them throughout the car. Here, the gear lever at the back, and they are there, of course, to mimic the iconic shape of the rotors in that rather special engine. And that's another reason that I'm thinking of buying either this one or something quite like it. I often think of myself not so much as a car collector, but an engine collector. And I have owned and driven stuff with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 and 12 cylinders. I've never owned a Rotary though. Be quite cool to have, I think. And just in case you've come here because of my lovely clickbait title, why do I think that? Why is this not a car for Americans? Well, they, I think, more than anybody, love to measure things. They love big engines, big power output, big, impressive numbers. And this just isn't about that at all. It's about the driving experience. Funny thing is, though, this is actually the perfect car for a great number of Americans. And I gotta be honest here, it is actually in the United States where I developed a little bit of appreciation for the Rotary, because a good friend of mine took me out to something called the Deals Gap Rotary Rally, which is a big extravaganza of all things Wankel engined. And over there, they love these. See, here in Britain, the RX-8, it's kind of died off a little bit. People aren't really into it so much anymore, likely because of its thirst. This genuinely is about as bad as a Ferrari in terms of fuel economy. Being really, really gentle earlier, I was getting about 22 to the gallon. The engine's design also mean they go through oil in a fairly serious way. And one of the issues the RX-8 had here, I think, is that in order to try and encourage sales, they tried to aim this at fleet buyers. Yeah, and they did that, I think, because on paper, a 1.3 litre 4-door Mazda doesn't sound particularly exciting. In reality, of course, you knew that this was a proper sports car. And believe me, it is. But In order to make it even modestly palatable, they near doubled the service intervals to something like 10,000 miles. With an engine that can drink a litre of oil every 1,000 miles and only holds 4 and a bit litres of the stuff, well, the results were predictable. Company car owners do not check their oil, no matter how much you might tell them and remind them how important it is. Instead, they all just wait until the oil light comes on, and by then it is likely too late. However, today, I think that's not so much of an issue. Many of these have now been rebuilt, often in very fruity and interesting configurations, like bridge porting or street porting if bridge is a little bit too extreme. Today, these are almost all in the hands of enthusiasts, but there are still bad cars out there, and though the engines are the thing everybody likes to talk about, these have other issues too. The big one, rust. Even this, a very, very well maintained example, is showing very slight signs where the spoiler mounts, where stones have hit the front, it's already started to corrode in a very, very minor and easily fixable way. This is being sorted before sale. I asked if I could have the car before everything gets tended to. We actually had the car MOT today and I went underneath it, and I'm happy to say that as Japanese cars go, bear in mind this is 15 years old, it's actually in reasonably good shape. Many of the earlier ones, not so much. This is a 2010, and here in Britain, this was the final year of sale, because unfortunately, us Brits just never quite got the RX-8. And I suppose you could say a similar thing about a couple of this car's potential rivals. On the one hand, the Honda S2000, which came out a little bit earlier, debuting in 1999, going through until 2009, and then just after the Toyota GT86. Out of the box, and bear in mind, I am biased, I own an S2000, this is by far the best of them. Now, the engine in the S2000 is also magnificent and mighty. This actually has a slightly smoother spread of torque and power. Still very much anemic in the first half of the rev range, but does a good job. Gearbox already discussed. It's the handling, though, really, where this reigns supreme over both the Toyota and the Honda. You see, the Honda is a spiky little so-and-so, particularly in early guys. With the Toyota, even more frustratingly, they deliberately made it a little bit wayward. But the way they did it meant that actually it wasn't fun, it was just a little bit scary on occasion. That was a car that on paper was built for people that wanted something a bit like this, only a touch more reliable. And they certainly are easier things to own. But that engine in the Toyota, it's just not nice to rev out. This is an absolute delight. It's a joyous thing, and sure, it doesn't have the most punch, but on a road like this, it's got all the power I could ever ask for, and a chassis to make using every single bit of it an utter joy. Should you also be of a mind to modify the car? Well, thanks chiefly to my American friends and of course the Japanese aftermarket scene in general, there are loads and loads of choices. In fact, Damani is only selling this because he has now bought a second one, which is much the same, but already has quite a few modifications on it. And modifications aside, the only other way to tell his car, which is a 2009, apart from this, a 2010, are the wing mirrors. This has these dirty great big things on, which until it was pointed out to me, didn't bother me, and now they do. But, on the other hand, this also has a better gearbox. I also got to admit, I wasn't really sure about the white colour. Damani usually has black cars. His father then goes for the white ones. And when it came to this, he explicitly wanted a white one. I said, why? And he said, well, the black just doesn't look so good. For the R3, well, the second-gen car, they changed it. It looks a little bit weird. It looks almost sort of brown. And on this, it doesn't work. This lovely pearl white, though, it's utterly magnificent. And look, I get it. There are 101 reasons why you might not want an RX-8. What's most frustrating about it is that on the one hand, the fairly generous rear seating and a good-sized boot make this a brilliant daily. But the servicing of it, the economy, they kind of count against it. It's not actually even that noisy. On the motorway, yeah, sure it revs, but doesn't bother you. Certainly not with the standard exhaust. But I have driven this road hundreds of times, sometimes in cars costing 20 times as much as this. Have I ever had more fun? I'm not sure that I have. The RX-8 is deeply flawed, but it's also magnificent, utterly and totally beguiling. The product of a company that was absolutely set on building a usable but blindingly good driver's car. At twice the price, it'd be a bargain. Just do yourself a favor, get the very best example that you can, read every single buyer's guide out there, and hopefully get yourself into a good one, because if you do, it'll be the best decision you've ever made. And I tell you something, you'll never be more grateful for all those bores down the pub keeping the prices low. Anyway, that's enough from me. I want to say a huge thank you to Ant and Damani for lending me this car, and as ever to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.